Well, Ted, thank you so much for joining me in this episode of Lynch with a Leader. It is an honor to have you.
So much fun to be on. Thank you.
Man, I have enjoyed. I hate we didn't hit record earlier. I've enjoyed
Right?
I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation because I have watched your career from afar. MLB career that included officiating 33 postseason series, 5 World Series championships, 2 All-Star games, 3 World Baseball Classics, 34 total years in professional baseball. Did you ever dream that would be your story?
Oh man, no way. As a young kid, my goal was not to be a major league umpire. I was going to play in the NFL. I was going to be heavyweight champion of the world, all of these things. But you know what? This is the great thing about walking with Jesus. It's just such a wild ride. You can't imagine what he has in store for you, looking back on it. And I worked my first game when I was 14 years old, just went with a buddy to do a little league game. And when you umpire, you either love it or you hate it. And I loved it, but I still wasn't, that's not what I wanted to do for a living. And so, it's just funny. I find myself at umpire school, and then I find myself in the minor leagues, and I had never dreamed I would make it to the big leagues. There's just not enough jobs. But then, in 1994, I get the call that I'm doing a AAA game in Tucson. They said, we need you tomorrow in Arlington to do a Rangers game. And and then the journey just continued until working my last game last year and walking off the field and just thanking God for the ride I had.
I've heard you a lot in other interviews and even some of the things I've read about you. Your parents played a big role in who Ted Barrett became. You are so, and we'll dive into this a little bit in a few minutes. You are so well respected and well known, but that didn't just come by accident. What role did your mom and dad and your family play in developing the foundation of who you became?
Yeah, my mom and dad, they definitely raised me with values, and we made sure that they always reminded me who I represented and represented them and our family. It was all about sports and playing your hardest and doing your best and being a good teammate and all the things that a parent should instill. And then being supportive. They were my biggest cheerleaders, no matter what I did. And I just felt like, they really they cared about what me and my brothers were doing, and they poured into us. So I wouldn't be where I am today without them.
You were so well known in your career for how you treated coaches and players. And I heard you say in an interview, to get respect, you got to give respect. And that was taught to you by your mom. How much did that play into how you handled yourself? I mean, we're going to get into your boxing career a little bit, but how well did that play into how you walked out onto a field, how you dealt with an argument? How did that play into that?
Yeah, definitely. Players, I felt like when you treat them with respect, they'll treat you with respect back for the most part. But then also, as I got closer to Jesus, as I was walking with him, I was not always very good at handling situations. I was a hothead as a youngster in the minor leagues, and we say in umpiring, sometimes you pour gasoline on the fire. And I would do that. And it didn't work very well. And, we were talking about Bruce Bochy earlier. He was the manager in Spokane and rookie ball in an A ball when we were in the Cal League. And he pulled me aside and said, man, you're going to get fired. You can't act like that. And so, I knew that I just had to, as I pressed into Jesus, I'm like, Jesus, I need a new way to handle this. And I would bring him into the conversation, right? And he would, so it's all there in God's word about how to treat people, how to react in situations. And I'm like, man, let me try this, because what I'm doing ain't working. And then, also having a little bit of empathy toward people, what they're going through. I used to get yelled at, but it wasn't so much about what was going on in the game. A lot of what was going on in their lives. And, God started to reveal stuff to me, like, that's my child, and he's going through some stuff. And it's like, all right, now I'm able to have some be able to understand a little bit better of what's going on. So, I mean, not to get too deep on it, but it really helped me through situations. And then also, I always like to keep peace and keep order. I felt like as being a representative of Jesus out there, it's what he does, right? He takes chaos and turns it to order. So if I'm yelling and screaming and losing my temper, I'm not doing a very good job of keeping order and keeping peace. So I had to learn, and it worked. You know, if I could remain calm, if I could de-escalate the situation, we can get it under control, and then we could play baseball.
What were some of the daily disciplines you had to put into place? Because I think it's easy to think that in the off season and go, okay, I'm going to represent Jesus this year. And then the season starts and the grind of the season starts. My son's wife is the field reporter for the Rockies, Kelsey Wingert. And I know the schedule she keeps, and I know the travel schedule and the grind that players and their support staff and umpires have. How did you keep it out in front of you as you live this out? How did you do that?
Well, a big thing for us as umpires is community. So we started a community of guys, Jesus followers. We called it Calling for Christ. And so we would keep each other accountable, because I can get really lazy. And but I know it's important to be in God's word and be in it every day. So we'd have a reading plan and keep each other accountable. And then also praying, just taking time away from the madness of the ballparks and the schedule, and just to sit and be alone and listen and pray and talk. That became very important. And you know, at first, it like anything else, it's like working out. It's got to become a habit. But then once it became a habit, it was something that I really look forward to and do today. Whereas before, even reading the Bibles was a little bit of a chore for me in the beginning. But then the more I did it, and then I'd taken some classes and some seminary classes, and it started to like unlock for me. So then it's like, it becomes a joy to get in there. And what are you going to teach me today, God? And but starting out, it can be tough, because you know, you go a few days, you're reading you know, Leviticus, and you're like, hey, you know, I'm not really enjoying this. But then you start looking at the Bible as a whole, and you're like, okay, now I get it. Now I understand what you're trying to tell me.
That is so good. You had a phenomenal career. As you were going through it and you walked out on that field every day, how did you let the coaches know who Ted Barrett was, that you were more than the guy with the opposite, not the other team opposite uniform, but the other opposite uniform that's on the field? How did you begin to build that rapport with those coaches and with those players?
You know, early on, I would kind of try to tell people, hey, you know, I'm a Christian, but I know in baseball, it's kind of like, you gotta show me, don't tell me. So it was the way I handled situations. It became very apparent to me that the way that I would react to something, the way that I would handle a situation would speak volumes if I did it Jesus way. So a big thing is, I'll give you a quick example. I went to umpire school, and we were taught if someone does you wrong, say there's an ejection, and the next day the guy comes to apologize, you tell him, don't do it. You know, take your apology and stick it, you know, that type of thing. It was the way it was, because you're trying to get across to the player that I'm not going to allow you to do this. And that's what I did, because I was taught that, but it didn't feel right. And so one day Jesus was just working on me and saying, you've got to forgive. You've got to have a forgiving heart. And so one day I had an ejection of a coach in Detroit, the bench coach, and I ejected him. And the worst type of apology is when a player, you play, so you know this, someone else comes out and goes, hey, so-and-so wants to tell you he's sorry. And then my response always, well, tell so-and-so to have the courage to come out here and tell me himself, right?
Yeah.
But I just felt Jesus saying, forgive him. And I'm like, I don't want to. But then you start thinking, man, I've been forgiven so much. And you think about the parable of the two debtors, and it's like, ooh, man. And again, that's what the Bible does, right? You take it and you can apply it to your life. So even the tough ones like this. So I said, well, go back and tell him that he's forgiven. I've been forgiven for so much, so I want to forgive him. So, I dropped that little nugget in there, and it's not, it's a Jesus moment without being so open and direct. And the guy looked at me and goes, really? You want me to tell him that? I said, yeah. He went in and told him, came back out. And every time I saw that guy after that, for the next 15 years, he was smiling. He was gracious. He was saying hello. I'll give you another incident that happened. If you don't mind me telling stories.
No, this is awesome. Are you kidding me?
So Chris Singleton was playing for the White Sox, outfielder, just a great ball player and a great man. And as you know, playing baseball, a lot of times the language used is, I liken it to the military, right? You've got these cuss words or adjectives, pronouns, and I could fall into that. And I had a confrontation with a coach one day, and Chris Singleton was the base runner, and he was coming out to the outfield, and he said, hey, if you don't mind me saying, remember who you represent, and you need, watch your language out here. He was saying it in a kind, manner. I told him, well, what you need to do is mind your own business and go play center field and let me umpire and let me handle situations the way I want. Because I thought at the time as a young man, okay, I'm going to be a Jesus follower. I'm going to be a Christian, but there's things I do on the field that, I have to get a pass here, God, and God's like, no, you don't get a pass. So I'm laying in bed that night and I'm thinking, who's this Chris Singleton guy? How dare he judge me? He doesn't know me. And then I just feel God just say, I sent him. I'm like, oh man. And God's like, if you're going to follow me, you got to do it in every area of your life. You don't get a pass on the field. And I'm like, oh man, I might have to quit. So the next day I seek Singleton out and I'm like, hey man, can I talk to you? He's like, no, I don't think I want to talk to you. And I was like, no, I want to apologize. He's like, oh, okay. I said, you're right. And so I'm like, but I don't know how to stop swearing. And he's like, why don't you ask Jesus to help you with that? And I'm like, why didn't I think of that? I prayed. I said, God, can you help me with this? And, I never swore on the field again.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think that was around 2003 or 4. So, you're looking at 20 more years. I'm ashamed to say I've sworn off the field, but on the field then it was, and that's something I couldn't just up and quit doing. So now I give grace to guys because you sit in chapel or you're in a Bible study with a player and then he's using salty language, and instead of me getting all high and mighty, I walk over to him and say, hey man, someone told me this once and I didn't like it, but I want to tell you this too, that, there's kids watching, there's so many cameras now, people are lip reading. Remember who you represent, and if you struggle with that, maybe go to Jesus with that. And most of the time the guys receive that pretty well. But again, that's stuck in my mind, and God would always remind me of that when I started to get judgmental or high and mighty. He's like, that was you once. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
and you nailed something earlier, Ted. There's a little over 70 major league umpires. The chances of getting there are not big, right? And there are a lot of guys that are great umpires that never make it. Yeah. When you decided to be, and I've seen you use this in other interviews, and you've talked about this before, when you made the decision, I'm going to wear the uniform of an umpire, but I'm going to be a minister in disguise. How did that change the purpose that you showed up at the ballpark with every day?
Well, yeah, it was a game changer because I was caught up in everything like everybody else. I wanted the choice assignments. I wanted to be a crew chief. I wanted a World Series. Those were the things that I was chasing. When the focus started becoming being a minister of the gospel, those things became secondary. And I didn't stress so much over that. I wasn't worried as much about the things that I was worried about before. Who am I going to work with? That was always a big thing at the beginning of the year, because, baseball people know, but others might not, that in Major League Baseball, there's a crew of 4, and we stay together the whole year. Now, sometimes there'll be vacations or breaks or, some shuffling, but for the most part, you stay together the whole season. Where hockey and basketball, they'll interchange. They're not on a set crew. The linesmen, well, maybe we'll go with different reps. But with us, we're together the whole year. So there's always this anxiety. Who am I going to be with? Is it somebody that I like? Is it someone that I get along with? And once I realized that this was a mission field, it took all the pressure off. Now, God's going to bring the crew that he wants me to be on for a reason. And I can't tell you how much, that just relieved anxiety from me. And so it was a scary thing, though. So I had some testimony cards made up. There's a picture, players have done it, and a guy said, I could do that for you. And I just put a gospel message on the back with my picture. And I went to a union meeting, and I handed out the card to everybody. And I came home, I told my wife, I just committed career suicide, because nobody wants to work with the Jesus dude, right? And so I get on a crew, and it was great. And I saw a supervisor during the season, and he said, hey, I just want you to know that you are the most requested umpire, because crew chiefs make requests.
Yep.
And I was like, how does that happen? And so, I started to realize that God, he's got his hand in this. It's not just we go out to work and he's not really concerned about that. And, he's just sitting up there and he's too busy for everybody. Man, he's got his hands in the most intricate details of our professions, of our daily lives, of our interactions. Like, he's there right in the middle of, confrontation, which I had a lot of, and then resolution. Man, he's right in the middle of it. I'm like, man, Jesus, you really are that big that you're right in the middle of this baseball game. And then I started to realize, like, man, this is a mission field here. This baseball field, this game can be like church. We could be preaching the gospel to people with just by them watching us.
That and what I love about that doesn't matter your profession, right? I mean, that it could be umpiring, it could be principal, it could be superintendent of schools, it could be CEO. It doesn't matter. When that transition happens, getting out of bed changes, because all of a sudden you got a different mentality that you walk in with. I think all of us are spectators, right? We all watch professional baseball. We love it, depending on what city you're in. What's something umpires feel and go through you wish everybody who sat in the stands, who watched on TV, understood? What is something you go, God, if I could just sit down to that guy in section 304 that just threw his beer can or his popcorn up in the air over a call, what do you wish everybody knew about major league umpires as a whole? What would you say?
Mike, I'm glad you asked that question, because I don't think fans realize, and they don't think about probably what the umpires go through just to get to a game. They're getting up at 4 a.m. They're fighting through the airports, just like a lot of businessmen do every day, through security, getting on a plane, enduring delays, and then landing and getting a rental car, driving to the hotel, getting checked in, all while they have a game that night that they're about to go out and work the plate. It's exhausting. It's grueling. But then throw on top of that, they're trying to raise a family, being on the road. They're 3,000 miles away. They get a call. This has happened to me. Pipe burst. There's a flood in the kitchen, right? Luckily, I've got a wife that she's pretty self-reliant. She's like, I'll take care of it. I'll handle it. But, then that's in your mind as you walk on the field. Or you've got children going through things. You've got adult children going through problems. You've got parents that are now getting elderly in their health, and they're sick. They're on their deathbeds. People pass away, right? And it's these are all things that you got to block out as you walk on the field. and go out and be perfect. And sometimes that's hard to block out. Not only that, we have anxiety as we walk on the field. There's performance anxiety. There's, so think about this, and police officers get this, and other people get this, where they don't make people happy, right? I'm gonna make half the people mad by a decision. And then there's people who don't understand rules and they're yelling and screaming. So I wish people would realize these men and women in the minor leagues, and hopefully one day we'll have one in the big leagues, but they're going through stuff in their lives and they're trying to block it out and do the best they can. That's not an excuse if they don't perform well. But I'll give you an example. There's a high profile incident. It was the Yankees, not to call it Aaron Boone, because I like Aaron, but everybody saw the play with Laz Diaz. He's imitating him and he's angry. Let me give you a little backstory on Laz Diaz. Laz Diaz was walking in New York to his replay assignment. In June, he suffered a heart attack. Goes home, gets health care. He's in the hospital, recuperating, resting. Laz, former Marine, I called him an ex-Marine once. He says there's no ex-Marines. He's a former Marine. He's like, I'm getting back on the field. And, the medical staff for Major League Baseball is great. They're like, hey, don't rush it. He's like, I won't, but when I'm ready, I'll come back because I got to get back on the field. It's what I do. So that was his first play job back after recuperating from a heart attack, getting back on the field. And he's greeted by that, Maybe if some people knew that circumstance, for example, I think I was reading the other day, Clayton Kershaw's been hurt. He's going to come back and throw, I think, Thursday.
Yep. He
He may not be as sharp as he is when he's on a roll and healthy.
That's right.
Laz wasn't as sharp as he was in May and June before he suffered his heart attack. So thanks for letting me present that side of it. Maybe that'll give some guys some perspective.
It's so funny because I think in our minds, we forget the humanness of things. We forget, so back in 2008, I started doing chapel work for the Atlanta Falcons. It changed me. It changed the way I'm a fan. It changed because I've sat in the Bible study with them on Saturday night before the game on Sunday.
Yeah.
And I've seen them reading the newspaper to see, things going on in the world, watching their college football team play, talking about their families who aren't there at the hotel with them. And you go, they're just kids. They're just kids who are really good at what they do. They're really big and they make a lot of money, but they're kids. And I'm telling you, it's a game changer. It's a game changer. Yeah. What would people not know about professional baseball players? They see them hit, they see them throw, they see them run. What are things you learned as an umpire about these young men that put on these uniforms with all these talents that the average person may not know about them?
I think the average person would look at a major league player and say, this guy's playing a game for a living. He's making literally millions of dollars to do it. You would think that this person would be the happiest person in the world. But there's not a whole lot of joy on a baseball field right now. And I think that's the difference between when I came up to do my first major league game in 1994 to now. I think the pressure, the performance pressure, and when things become numbers based, their value and their worth is locked in on numbers. Their batting average, their home runs, their WAR, their, all this stuff. And I'm not making light of the numbers thing, but I am saying I think it's driven these guys to get outside of their identity because they're operating out of a belief that their value is put in numbers, and it's just simply not. And I think guys had a little more fun because they were freer before the emphasis on the numbers. And I think it became more about team and winning, and not to say that players are selfish. That's not what I'm saying. They want to win, obviously, but they put their value in their performance. And so but you see the guys that are following Jesus, and they are like, my value is not in my performance or what I do here. My value is in I'm valuable no matter what happens, no matter what my performance is. Mm. So you get the guys that are trying to make the team, the kid that comes up, yep, and he's doing his best. And then, I've heard players say, you make it to the big leagues, now you got to work like heck to stay here.
That's right.
So it becomes, they just work and they work and they work and they work. And then you get an older guy. And the times I've seen guys who say, hey, this is my last year, I'm going to retire. They are the freest. They are having the most fun. They want to win. They want to go out with a World Series trophy, right? But they also are like, I'm not going into a negotiation next year for my salary. And then you have the guys that sign these mega deals long term. You think, oh, they've got it made. But the pressure they have to perform and try to justify that huge contract. So there's a whole lot of pain and suffering going on a baseball field. And then when Jesus can come into the middle of that and free them up, and I've seen this happen with guys, it's a beautiful thing. And he did it in my life. He takes the pressure off of, I'm not performing now for the players, the coaches, the managers, the fans. I want to do well. And, as a man and as a flesh, I want people to say, oh, he does a good job. But really walking off the field, I'm really working for an audience of one. Mm. And if he's pleased, it's like, I've got to find my value and self-worth in that. And since the advent of social media, you get on Twitter, and someone will send something that someone will say nice about me, and then you just have to read down a few comments, and then it gets really nasty. And then it's usually like, Angel Hernandez is terrible, and wait, Angel's not even in the conversation. How did he get in this conversation? The way he gets beat up by the media and the fans is crazy. But and we signed up for it. I'm not complaining, but I do know the only way that I kept my sanity is remembering that Jesus is really the only opinion that counts.
That is so good. And man, I think, Ted, you're spot on the pressures those kids is what they are. Those kids experience, right? I had a good friend. He goes to my church. He had a good career, and then he ends up getting traded and then becomes the 25. So he'll come out, throw an inning, and then get DFA'd. And then he's sitting in a hotel room to see who picks him up, and he ends up back in AAA. He's there, gets picked back up, dropped. And you're just like, and I'm seeing his spouse, and you're just, it's hard. That is a hard life. When you think about your time, you walk to the field, you put your hat on, you guys prep, you do your study, you get graded, which I think is so interesting, all the grading system you guys go through. When you walk on the field, who are people that you ran into? And there's probably way more than we can ever bring up, but who are 3 or 4 people, players and coaches, when you saw them, it made you smile? And why did it make you smile? What was it about their presence that you went, I just enjoy being around them? What would you say?
Yeah, man. Yeah, like you said, so many. But one name came to mind was Tony Beasley, third base coach with the Rangers. And the base coaches are, when we're working first or third, they're the ones we had the most interaction with. And, Tony, especially, he came through some health things, and he's relying on Jesus to bring him through. And he even told me, he's like, I'm going to be healed, whether it's here or in heaven. It's like, you hear things like that on a baseball field. You're like, this is perspective. Mm. This is the real thing. This is why we're here. And being an encourager like he was, because everybody wants to tear everybody else down, right? Or if I can tear someone down, it'll elevate me. But then you get people speaking truth and speaking, positive, and it's game changing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Tony's a guy that he would light me up. And so a lot of guys that I was in the minor leagues with, like I mentioned, Bruce Bochy was the manager in Spokane in 1989. So I would always, and then 2014, he wins the World Series with San Francisco. And we had this moment where I saw him in the tunnel after. I'm like, hey, this reminds me of 1989 when you won the championship in the Northwest League. And so there's that connection of longevity. Other people that I had as players then become managers. A guy like a Tim Salmon, who I came in through the Northwest League, California League, Pacific Coast League, playing for the Angels. And now I see him, at a Bible study or a church event. It's like there's that bond, and he did it the right way. I tell young kids to watch a guy like a Paul Goldschmidt, someone that plays for Jesus, plays with a joy, but it's serious. And he's a guy that he's not outspoken so much. He's not the guy that's grabbing the microphone and giving his testimony, although he will do that. But just the way he plays the game, the way he treats people, the way he prepares, and he's excellent, right? Winning an MVP. He's a guy that impresses me. To a negative side, the guys that will maybe say things one way and then act another, it's devastating.
Yep.
It's devastating because you know that they are, it seems insincere, right? And so someone from the outside looking in says, man, I heard that guy give his testimony and now he's acting like that. And it really affects umpires because, man, I thought this guy was a Jesus dude, right? And you hear what he called me?
Yep.
And again, God reminds me, yeah, that was you once. So I don't get too judgmental. But then to see the guys that do walk the walk and talk the talk and it matches, it's like, yes. And there are more of them. So we can focus on being positive. So, yeah, I could go on all day.
That's fantastic. And it's so interesting because there's just such a human element to it. And you see it if you go to a game, the umpires and players talking as they're walking out on the field and they're running on the field. And there's a bond. There's a bond around a game that's developed. But your career prior to baseball, you spent a lot of years in boxing. You spent a lot of years sparring with some of the greats, Tyson, Foreman, some of those guys. I'd love to know this. And I don't know if you've ever been asked this, but I was trying to find it to see if you had. But how did the world of boxing and you doing what you did as a sparring partner with so many of those guys, how did that prepare you to be a great umpire? What would you say?
Well, getting punched, I never got punched on the field, which is good.
That's good.
Hit by some foul balls. But yeah, it's like after getting beat up by some of those guys, every day after that is better.
That is so true.
Yeah. But what it did also is it helped me, I think, with concentration, being in the ring and being able to focus and bring things down. So now I can stand in a stadium full of 60,000 people screaming in a World Series on every pitch, and I can focus. I could bring it down to this strike zone in this plate area. And I think that really helped my concentration in being able to lock in. Helped me with people a little bit. It helped me, I knew my role as a sparring partner. I was in there to prepare that guy to get ready for a fight. It wasn't about me. I wasn't the star. He was. So I had to play my role and do my thing. As an umpire, I walked out on the field. I wasn't the guy that fans came to see. This is not about me. This is about the game. And I'm going to do my job to facilitate that, and it helped me, I think, keep perspective of what my role was. I like to say my brother was an actor, so we would joke. It's like, sometimes you got to wear the black hat, right? But it's the job. And sometimes, in the theater of baseball, I was the villain at times because, I was standing up doing the right thing, but it's not always the popular thing. So, yeah, all kind of little analogies like that. But I really think that the main thing, to answer your question, boxing helped me focus, especially in big situations.
You said, go
sorry,
ahead.
Mike, I just wanted to add, most of the times I was a guy, especially later in my career, I love talking to players because I like, getting to know guys. And people would always ask, hey, what were you talking to this guy about or that guy about? We're talking about boxing. Because a lot of baseball players love boxing, so they would ask me, "Hey, who's going to win this fight?" Or "Did you see that fight? What'd you think about that?" Joey Votto with the Reds, huge boxing fan. And so, I'd be at second base and he's yelling across from first and talking about boxing, and, we're yelling. And so that usually dominated the conversations on the field.
That is fantastic. That is funny. That is fantastic. But it's a grind. That season is a grind. That is a long season. And to be able to get your mind off things for a little while is a good thing.
Yeah.
As you sit now in this brand new season, so you cut the lights off on that career, but your story isn't over. What's next for Ted Barrett? What's next for you in this brand new season of life that you're in?
Well, I've stayed in the baseball world. I'm working for UPI, Unlimited Potential Incorporated, and it's cool because there are 7 former players, and I'm the umpire, so I'm kind of the stepchild being added on here. But it's great because it's community.
Yep.
But also, as I go and I do chapel with the umpires, and living here in Arizona, I get out to the Diamondback games. But I run into players and coaches, and Brian Hommel's the chaplain of the Diamondbacks, and I'll tag along with him as he does the home and visitors. And so it's cool now that I have, in this season, I have developing deeper friendships with players, because there was always the separation.
Yep.
Of, there was casual relationships with players, and then some of the ones that retired became good friends with after they were off the field and out of coaching and out of uniform. But now that I'm off the field as well, I can develop some of the relationships with some of the guys. So it's cool seeing them and being able to talk a little bit more about life and in depth, or sitting down over a cup of coffee, and then just doing Bible studies. I was able to go to retreat last year and hang with some players and do communion. And so that's a different season. But then also for me, it's the rhythm of slowing down instead of running for a plane constantly. And I'm just really thankful that God's allowed me to do this. And then, my wife and I joke, it's coming up on 35 years of marriage. I got married. We got married. I went to umpire school the next day.
Wow.
So it's almost like, she jokes, yeah, we've been married 34 years, but really it's 17 because he's been on the road half the time. So we're developing this rhythm of life together, and, as empty nesters and grandchildren. And so I get out and teach some clinics for Major League Baseball. They're kind enough to bring me out once a month, and then I'll tie that in with visiting players and umpires. But I'm able to make a little schedule. I've got 6 grandkids now, and there's a birthday party. Those are birthday parties that I've missed since they were born, and I'm able to say I'm not going to leave that day because I've got a birthday party. And so just to sit there at this 10-year-old birthday party and have a piece of birthday cake and watch it blow out the candles, these are things I've never got to do before, and it's just a gift from God. Or we did it in the hotel room while I was traveling. So
yep.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And I truly believe that, God's story with you is just starting, and the influence you've had is going to continue for generations, and I think about even Mickey Mantle coming to know Christ in the 9th inning, and him calling Bobby Richardson, who we talked about earlier. Well, Bobby and Mickey played together. Bobby retired in 1966. And this is now way after that. But those seeds that were planted just took a long time to come, but they came. And I just think of the harvest of your life, Ted, as you continue on to go, oh my gosh, I never even remember that conversation in the hotel, or that conversation standing at second base where I put my hand on a kid's shoulder and said, hey man, I'll be praying for you. And that comes to fruition years later. So final question, and I'll let you go. The Bible says that David served his purpose in his generation, and then he fell asleep. What do you think was the purpose God created Ted Barrett for? Why did he give the parents he gave you? Why did he give you the skill set in the past that he gave you? What do you believe was the purpose that he knit you together, unlike anybody else, but he knit you together to do?
Wow, man, you think I'm humbled when you think about that, because he did do that to all of us. And I feel like he strategically placed me in a spot that I could minister to. and I could do it by umpiring. Think about this. I could glorify God just by umpiring a baseball game. That wouldn't be like my plan of being an evangelist, right? Because I get the, Billy Graham stadiums full of people. Greg Laurie at the Harvest Crusades out in California. To me, that's an evangelist. But Jesus is like, no, my evangelists are the guys that wake up when the alarm clock goes off and go to work. So for me, it was a baseball field. And I'll just some encouragement. There was no real way, I think, to kind of players will, they'll come to bat or hit a home run and point to the sky. It's like, how can we as umpires glorify God? So when I became a crew chief and when it was good with all the guys on my crew, we would walk out before home plate, we'd exchange lineups and, the coaches and managers, whoever bought the lineup cards out, would retreat to their dugouts. That time we have just for a second before the game started, and we would just huddle up and pray. And I was apprehensive at first. I'm like, I might get some pushback from this. And we didn't get on the microphone and we weren't praying out loud. It's just us as a crew, 4 of us. And man, I got more positive feedback from that, from players, from fans. And it's funny how reporters tried to stir it up, I think, at times. They're asking me, what were you doing there? And I'm like, that's crew business, right? It's crew business. And so with that, Mike, I want to encourage people out there because you're working a job, and I don't know where people work or what they're doing, or they, if they're playing ball, if they're working in an office. I mean, Jesus has strategically placed you there. And if I didn't do it, he'd have found somebody else. So it's not like, oh, Ted, you got to do this. But I got to join in on what Jesus was doing. And as I look back at my career, the World Series are great. The times I got to be a crew chief, going to different countries and working, and that's all fantastic. But the conversations I had, praying for guys on the field. I had Chris Bando pray for me once between innings on the field. I was like, we're all going to get fired. But what that did to my soul was amazing. And so all these little interactions, like you said, to think that someone may have met Jesus and they'll be in eternity in heaven as a result of me or someone else umpiring a baseball game. And how cool is that to think about? So one of the things I dream about is being in heaven and someone coming up and going, man, I never met you, but I was at a game once and you were praying, and that made me want to know more about Jesus, and then Jesus saved them. And I mean, how cool is that? The way you and I were connecting dots before the call, and now we're going to get to heaven and connect dots, and you're part of that. Oh my gosh, that's what life is all about. So sorry about rambling, but man, you got me fired up.